Sober October for the non-alcoholic, giving up something else other than booze. What does that look like? That's what I'm going to talk about in today's video. My name is Vanessa. I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is October 8th, 2017. I'll have 7 years by next week. Pretty awesome. So today I want to talk about what we can give up, what we are actually addicted to, what addiction in sobriety actually means. And give you some ideas for some other things that you can give up if booze was never really that challenging, or maybe you're already sober and you still want to participate in Sober October. This is not going to be the video you think it's going to be. Just bear with me. We'll get somewhere by the end of it, okay? Something that I feel like normies or people who are not addicts and alcoholics look at the addict and alcoholic and get kind of inspired by the story that like this turnarounds that can happen in somebody's life, right? It's like, here's this person who is a gutter drunk, or me, got 3 DUIs, went to jail, rehab, sober living, still made a mess of myself. It's kind of a gross drunk to, being able to live independently, have a good group of friends, have a job that I like, be engaged in hobbies and activities and communities that I enjoy, like a much more fulfilling life, right? And it's such an inspiring story that we can see in millions of times over in this country, in this world, in our communities. And I feel like sometimes people who are not addicted to substances get the impression that they can't also have that experience. Or people who are in sobriety and they're like, okay, well, I've done this. I've already had my awakening. Is this all there is? I feel like there is still like another challenge, another thing that we can always become sober from, right? And like to be sober means to literally not be affected by, to be free of, or to get sensible about. So usually that's in relation to alcohol, or drugs. But there are actually like a lot of things that we could become sober from. So that's mainly what I want to talk about. And be warned that some of this might be triggering. Okay. Yeah. So here are just a list of some things that we can get sober from. And remembering that sober means to be free of, get sensible about, or be not affected by. All right. Comfort, sadness, trauma, drama, emotions, bad news, cell phones, validation, pessimism, bad relationships, sugar, hopelessness, chaos, routine, overperforming, underperforming. Do any of these resonate for you? Because this is literally a list of things I have been addicted to in my past. And I do want to give, again, this warning that like I am a recovered drunk. I'm in no way, shape, or form a medical professional. So if you are surprised to see trauma on there, I don't blame you. But in my experience, like this is just a list of things that I have like experienced addictions to. And so this is like me just sharing my experience on that. I am not a professional. So again, so what does it mean to be addicted then, right? What does it mean to be addicted to trauma or drama or chaos? It means to have a compulsive, chronic, physiological or psychological need for something. Okay. So how do you become addicted to chaos? Well, I feel like for so many years, my nervous system was just wired for the high adrenaline, high risk, hot, cold, push, pull. Like it found safety in that mechanism of chaos. And so my eyes, ears, my whole being was kind of attuned to finding threats and drama and instability and anchoring onto that. It took like a couple of years, honestly, until I could deprogram and kind of or restabilize, regulate my nervous system before I started feeling comfortable in being safe or just being present at least, It was if you've never experienced that before, I don't know how else to explain it because that probably sounds crazy. But it is the reality of how I existed for a lot of my life. Trauma, I got addicted to the story, to the identity that I created around traumatic experiences that I've had, and I use it to justify certain beliefs and behaviors and my outlook perspective on the world. And it became intoxicating to root my identity or my like axis for, the way that my entire world kind of revolved around the axis of trauma and the story that I told myself about what it meant, what it made me, and, how my worthiness or identity was attached to those events that happened, even from like freaking 30 years ago. Like these are the things that I attached meaning to. Um, and then emotions. Like who needs mood altering substances when I have a head full of toxic thoughts and a body full of hormones and adrenaline and cortisol, just like primed to take action on those impulsive thoughts that I could have, and they're never really happy thoughts. They could be like totally detrimental to how I connect with other people. Um, and then hopelessness, like who can have hope in this economy? Haven't you doom scrolled lately? Haven't you checked the news? Aren't you listening to all the doom and gloom podcasts? And it's so easy to become enraged, and to engage in that rage and to like propagate that instead of hope. It's much easier to say something is terrible than to open up to the vulnerability of having hope about something getting better, right? Um, and so I can go on and on. Like I have examples for everything that I already listed and how I've been addicted to them. You let me know if any of that resonated for you and if you want me to make videos on like a sugar addiction, for example. But the bigger picture here, it's not about the specific, not drinking. It's not about the specific compulsion. It is about what is at the root of all of these compulsions, all of these addictions. And at the root of all of them is fear. You thought I was going to say resentment. I know. But at the root of resentment is fear. And we can become addicted to resentments as well, by the way. So one of my favorite poets, writers is Sylvia Plath. And she has a collection of short stories called Johnny Panic and the Bible of Dreams. And the main story is one of my favorites. And I think about this every time I see like mass groups of people in fear or in panic, or when I myself am in fear or in panic, or when I see my dear sweet sponsees in fear or panicking. And I'm going to read you a part of it. I basically have this memorized, but I it's beautifully written to begin with, but just bear with me because it gets kind of dramatic. And this is just what goes through my head. So this is Sylvia Plath, Johnny Panic and the Bible of Dreams. Maybe a mouse gets to thinking pretty early on how the whole world is run by these enormous feet. Well, from where I sit, I figure the whole world is run by one thing and this one thing only: panic. Panic with a dog face, devil face, hag face, horror face. Panic in capital letters with no face at all. It's the same Johnny Panic, awake or asleep. And he tells us the only thing to love is fear itself. Love of fear is the beginning of wisdom. The only thing to love is fear itself. May fear and fear and fear be everywhere. His love is the 20-story leap, the rope at the throat, the knife at the heart. Like, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is how we are operating as a world. And like, this is the reality that a lot of people choose to opt into. And it's like, why are we choosing to exist and rule and like bow down to fear, like at every corner? And it's like, I feel like when you undergo a spiritual awakening, especially as you go through it, like through the 12 steps, you kind of awaken to the diet of fear that you're being fed every single day. And like there are fears that come externally, and then there are fears that we manufacture, right? And then there are the fears that are external, but that we internalize and digest and make part of our DNA and part of our nourishment, you know? And it's like we become so afraid of letting go of the fear, because what does it mean to live a life without fear? Um, I mean, that can almost feel more unsafe than feeling safe. And I am not going to go down the rabbit hole of, conspiracy theories and like powers and systems of government and who really benefits from our fear. Um, because I want to remind everyone that like these structures that exist are like imaginary, right? Like they are created and developed by humans in fear. And because I am a part of the human race, I can't really point at any one person in with authority or in leadership or in government or in certain communities. I can't point at them and say, look at how they are ruining things, because there are aspects of them that exist in me as well. Even the most hateful, most fearful, well, even hate actually originates in fear. In this behavior of like this power over is just something that's just, Ecclesiastes is is my favorite book in the Bible. And I think it's like everything has been done before. There is nothing new under the sun. For as long as humans have existed, there has been corruption, and it has always rooted in fear. And like, why are we ever so surprised? And why are we always retaliating in even more fear? Like, we need to find a new way, right? And this new way is in becoming sober from fear, becoming, like the way that I think about it is like, oh, all these people in power, oh, all you rich people, like, oh, creating all these systems, like you're boring. Like, think about something, like, do something new with all of that power, like become sober from fear and like from fear mongering. What a concept. But we can become sober from fear, and where like we're no longer opting into this diet, right? It's like just because they're scooping it out on our plate for our daily nourishment doesn't mean that we have to swallow and ingest it. And maybe we fast from it. Maybe we don't watch the news. Maybe we don't participate in using certain language. Language is a great way to dehumanize people, like when we begin to label people and treat them off of labels instead of the warm, soft-bodied, beating heart with red blood running through it, with families and created of love and dignity, then, when we forget that and we start to refer to people as labels, it's a really quick way to delegitimize a human soul, and it's a really quick way to dehumanize and to remove dignity from people, basically. And really that comes from a place of fear, again, because we're trying to power over or create otherness, right? And listen, this has been going on since the beginning of time. This is just how humans have been, but I believe that part of our evolution can be removing the DNA of fear from ourselves, basically, right? Like kind of rewiring ourselves. Because there are biological and evolutionary needs for fear. Like we have evolved to become afraid, like we should probably be afraid of bears in a forest, for example, or fires in a forest, or like deforestation of our forest. Like, that's pretty terrifying. Maybe we should just leave the forests alone. What a concept, right? But in that same vein, maybe we should just leave fear alone. It's going to exist, but we don't have to engage with it. Maybe we can see it, we can observe it, we can acknowledge that it exists. We don't have to, um, fight fear either. We don't have to come at it through a means of aggression or violence. We can just acknowledge that it exists that its presence is here, but we don't have to use fear as the conductor of our lives. We don't have to use fear as the roadmap. We don't have to rely on or depend on this GPS of fear to direct all of our choices and how we connect to other humans, right? Because fear is intoxicating and it's really easy to become dependent upon it. And it's, the way I think about fear is like, all right, like I'm not gonna let, well, I like to check in with my body and see if it feels in fear, and then I get to like kind of digest my thoughts and think like, okay, where is this fear coming from? And then it's like, okay, maybe that fear is there, maybe it's real, maybe it's perceived. But here is the thing, like if I need to get to where I'm going, like fears, if you need to come, you can come, but you're gonna ride like on top of the car. Like there's no room for you in the car. You cannot drive my car. You cannot be shotgun. You cannot be a backseat driver. You are strapped to the top of the car. It's me, Olive, and God in the car. And I've never seen God, but God takes up a lot of room. And so when I invite God in, and God is kind of basically like he likes to let me pretend that I'm controlling things, but it's really that's my GPS now at this point. And so I don't know how God fits into my car, but God fits somehow, God makes a way. And so I just want to acknowledge that, like, I don't ever want, and very much how the alcoholic becomes sober from alcohol. We don't, we cease fighting everything and everyone, even alcohol. It's like we can cease fighting everything and everyone, even fear. Like it's a non-issue for us at this point. We've become neutralized. We were in this state of neutrality now, and we can create a life that is not dependent and run upon by fear, right? So think about how fear manifests in your life. I gave you a list of it: my trauma, my drama, the chaos. The sugar even comes from a stem of fear. It stems from fear. And I feel like the first step to even like acknowledging that there's something to get sober of is to acknowledge that there is a problem, right? And so maybe I'll make this a 12-step series about how to get sober from fear. I don't know. Because clearly I still deal with it on a day-to-day basis as well. I don't want anyone to think that I'm just walking around fearless, because I feel like that is having an identity rooted in fearlessness is also dangerous. I think that only like psychopaths or sociopaths are probably fearless. So I'm not trying to get everyone to be fearless. I think that that's a dangerous message. But we can coexist in this way, perhaps. I mean, that's kind of as far as I've gotten. So maybe it's the blind leading the blind here, but tell me what you think about fear. Tell me if you acknowledge that fear is an issue in your life and if you're ready to get sober of it. And then maybe I'll create some more videos about this if you found this helpful at all. All right, leave me comments. I love you. Okay.